The first time a stranger asked me where the wedding arch should go, I was standing on my back porch in sweatpants, holding a bowl of dog food and wondering if my lemon tree was finally going to survive the fall. A woman in a satin robe stood at the bottom of my steps with curlers in her hair and a clipboard tucked under her arm. She smiled like we'd already agreed on everything. "Hi, quick question. Should the ceremony face the creek or the barn? Sienna says the barn is more rustic luxury, but the creek is like a whole moment." For a second, my brain just stalled because behind her were two bridesmaids carrying mason jars, a guy unloading folding chairs from a black van, and a wedding planner with a headset talking into a microphone, like my backyard was a concert venue. And lined along my gravel driveway, all the way down to the mailbox, were cars. I don't mean 2 or 3. I mean a line of cars long enough that my dog, Hank, looked at it and crawled under the porch like he'd seen a tornado coming. "No," I said. The woman blinked. "No? No wedding," I said, keeping my voice flat. "No caterer, no arch, no chairs, no anything. This is private property." Her smile faltered for half a heartbeat. Then she glanced at her clipboard like she had paperwork that could overwrite reality. "I'm sorry," she said carefully, "but we have a contract. We paid the deposit. This is Willow Ridge Farm. Ethan Price is the host." She looked up, bright again. "That's you. You're Ethan." I set the dog bowl down, stepped off my porch, and said the words I wish I'd never had to say to anyone in my life. "You've been scammed, and the person who scammed you is about to learn what consequences look like." Oh. Right then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my attorney, Lila Carter. "They're here." Now let me tell you how my quiet retirement in the Blue Ridge Mountains turned into deputies on my lawn, a forged contract, and a wedding party realizing they'd been sold a lie using my name. 2 years earlier, my life was a spreadsheet of calm routines and shared jokes. My wife, Diane, was the kind of person who could walk into a room and lower everyone's blood pressure just by existing. She was a school counselor for 20 years. Kids trusted her. Parents trusted her. Strangers at grocery stores trusted her. Me? I spent my career telling people no. I worked for the city of Charlotte as a building and safety inspector. Code compliance, permits, documenting violations, stopping shortcuts before they became funerals. If you've ever tried to explain to a guy with a nail gun why his brilliant money-saving idea is illegal, you know the kind of patience that job requires. Diane balanced me out. She'd say, "Ethan, you're not mean, you're preventative maintenance." Then cancer showed up and reminded us life doesn't care about jokes. 3 weeks after our 34th anniversary, I was signing paperwork in a hospital hallway while my world turned into a language I didn't speak anymore. Diane died on a Tuesday morning while rain tapped the window like it didn't know what else to do. After the funeral, I went home and found that the house felt too big for one heartbeat. Diane used to talk about the mountains like they were a promise. "One day," she'd say, "we'll get a place where the air tastes clean and the nights are quiet enough to hear your thoughts." We never got that one day, so when I retired, I took my grief and bought it anyway. A little place on 5 acres outside a small town in western North Carolina. A creek, the outline of a barn that needed work. A view of ridgelines that looked like the earth exhaling. I named it Willow Ridge because Diane loved willows, and because I'm not creative enough to pretend it had always been called that. I came here for peace. Not the fantasy peace where nothing ever goes wrong, the real peace where you can breathe without someone needing something from you. For a while, it worked. Mornings were coffee on the porch, and Hank chasing squirrels that always won. I rebuilt a section of fence and learned which birds were loud enough to sound offended. I cooked simple dinners and slept through the night for the first time in months. Then a number I didn't recognize called me on a Thursday afternoon. I almost let it go to voicemail, but old habits made me answer. "Uncle Ethan." a bright voice said, too cheerful to be natural. "It's Sienna." I knew Sienna, Diane's niece, 29, pretty, fast-talking, always on to the next version of herself, the kind of person who didn't have jobs so much as she had projects. Last I heard, she was an event stylist. Before that, she'd been a brand coach. Before that, she'd tried to sell meal plans online that involved words like clean and detox and energy. "Sienna," I said, "hey. I heard you moved to the mountains," she said. "Is it true you bought a farm, like a real storybook farm?" "It's not a farm," I said. "It was a barn and some land and a creek, but no animals besides my dog, and whatever raccoon thought my trash can was a buffet. It's just my home." "Exactly," she said, as if I'd confirmed her point. "Uncle Ethan, this is so perfect. I have the best idea, and I swear Diane would love it." My stomach tightened at Diane's name. "I'm listening," I said, because I'd been trained to hear the whole problem before I judged it. "Okay," Sienna said, "so I'm launching this micro-wedding concept, elopements, but elevated small groups, curated details, super tasteful, super intimate. And your place is literally the dream backdrop, creek, barn, mountain light. It's like Pinterest meets soulful healing." I stared at the ridgeline behind my barn and waited. "We'd only do it on weekends," she rushed on, "and you wouldn't have to lift a finger. I'd bring vendors, setup, cleanup, insurance, all of it. You'd just rent the space and make money. You're retired. This is passive income." I could practically hear her typing the word passive in all caps. "Sienna," I said, "no." Silence, then a small laugh. "No, as in not right now?" "No, as in not ever," I said. "This is my home. I didn't move here to host strangers." Her tone softened instantly, like someone switching to a tool that usually works. "Uncle Ethan," she said, "I get it. I do. But you're out there alone. And Diane wouldn't want that. She'd want you surrounded by love and laughter. She loved weddings. She loved family." There it was, the pivot. I felt my chest tighten, but my voice stayed calm. "Don't use Diane to sell me something," I said. A pause, then a colder breath. "I'm not selling," she snapped. "I'm asking family for help. Family supports family." "I'm saying no," I replied. "Fine," she said, bright again like a light switch. "Totally, I respect that. I'll figure it out." She hung up, and for about an hour I convinced myself it was done. 2 days later, my neighbor Gary knocked on my door. Gary is the kind of guy who wears the same hat every day and somehow looks like he's always halfway through fixing something. He held up his phone and said, "You rentin' your place out now?" He turned the screen toward me. It was an online listing with a glossy banner photo of my creek at sunset. The title read, "Willow Ridge Farm, Private Mountain Wedding Venue." It had my address, it had dates, it had prices, it had a deposit button, and the host name at the bottom was Ethan Price, my full name. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. "Where did you find this?" I asked. "My niece is getting married," Gary said. "She's been searching venues and this popped up. She sent it to me asking if it was your place." He scratched his chin. "It sure looks like your creek." It was my creek. It was a photo I'd taken and sent to Diane's family group chat last year with a little message. "Wish you could see this light." Diane would have loved it. Sienna had been in that chat. She'd taken the photo. She'd taken my piece and turned it into inventory. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't do anything dramatic. Instead, I did what I'd done for decades when people broke rules and expected the world to shrug. I documented. I took screenshots of everything, the full page, the booking calendar, the deposit terms, the contact email, the language about exclusive access. Then I called Sienna. She answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. "Uncle Ethan," she said. "Hi?" "Take it down," I said. "What?" "The listing," I said. "My address, my photo, my name. Take it down." Her sigh was theatrical. Oh my gosh, okay, first of all, calm down, it's just a draft. It's aspirational marketing. It's fraud, I said. You're taking deposits. I'm building a business, she snapped, and then softened her voice. Look, I already have people booked. They're excited. They've paid. You can't just watch me, I said. Remove it. She paused, then went for the blade she thought would cut deepest. You know, she said slowly, Diane used to say you were logical to a fault. She'd be disappointed you're being so cold. My hands tightened around my phone. Don't, I warned. Fine, she said. Too sweet. I'll fix it. Happy? She hung up. I refreshed the page. It was still there. Deposit button still live. Dates still filling up. That night, I called my attorney, Lila Carter. I'd met Lila during a permit dispute on a renovation years ago. She was sharp, calm, organized in a way that made liars sweat. I sent her the screenshots and the link. She called me back 20 minutes later. Ethan, she said, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is unauthorized use of property, fraudulent advertising, and likely wire fraud if she's collecting payments online. What do we do? I asked. 2 things, Lila said. We send a cease and desist tonight, and you start building a clean timeline, every screenshot, every call, every text. She paused. Also, change your locks. I stared at my door like it had offended me. This is family, I said. Family that's stealing your identity, Lila replied. Change the locks. So I did. New deadbolts, new gate chain, new padlocks on the barn. I felt ridiculous while I worked, like I was preparing for an apocalypse that wore mascara. But then I remembered something Diane used to tell me when I'd complain about my job. People don't like boundaries. They'll test them until they hurt. I slept with my phone on my nightstand that night, not because I thought Sienna would show up at 2 a.m., but because I didn't trust the part of me that wanted to keep pretending this was normal. The cease and desist went out by certified mail and email. It demanded the listing be removed immediately, my name and address removed, all deposits refunded, and confirmation in writing that she had no permission to use my property. It also warned that any further action would involve law enforcement and civil claims. For 2 days, there was silence. Then the listing disappeared. I let my shoulders drop for the first time in a week. 6 hours later, my phone buzzed. Gary sent another screenshot. Man, now it's on a different site, his text read. I opened the image. It was the same branding, but now the address was private. It said, location disclosed after deposit. The host name was still Ethan Price, and the contact email was now Willow Ridge, host.something.com, not my email, not my domain, but my name again. Sienna wasn't backing off, she was adapting. Then the dirty tactics started. First, a letter from the county arrived. Notice of investigation. Unlicensed commercial event activity. I stared at it like it was written in another language. Someone had reported that I was operating an illegal wedding venue and lodging business. I called the number on the letter. A tired-sounding woman said they'd received multiple complaints about traffic, noise, and overnight guests. I live alone, I said. I haven't hosted anyone except my neighbor's dog once. She was polite but firm. We're required to follow up, she said. An inspector will contact you. I hung up and sat down at my kitchen table. I'd spent my career as the guy making those calls, and now someone was using that system against me to exhaust me into compliance. I called Lila. She didn't sound surprised. She's trying to make you defensive, she said. She wants you tangled in paperwork and stress so you'll say yes just to make it stop. Can she do that? I asked. She can file complaints, Lila said. She can lie. She can't make the lie true. She paused. Get cameras. Now. So I bought a simple system and mounted one camera facing the gate and another covering my porch. I synced them to my phone and felt a little safer and a little angrier that I needed them. 3 days later, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as a social worker with Adult Protective Services. He said they'd received a report that I might be experiencing cognitive decline, that I was isolated, confused, unable to manage my affairs after the death of my wife. He spoke gently, like he was trying not to spook a deer. My jaw tightened so hard I could feel it in my teeth. "This is harassment," I said. "I'm 62, in good health." "Retired city employee. Which family member called you?" "I can't disclose that," he said. "But we're required to follow up on every report. Would you be willing to meet?" I closed my eyes for a second and pictured Diane's face when she'd listen to a kid's story without interrupting. She'd tell me cooperation doesn't mean surrender. "Yes," I said, "come by." When I told Lila, she swore softly. "She's escalating," Lila said. "We document the wellness check, we cooperate, show you're fine, and we add it to the file as evidence of bad faith harassment." The social worker came on a Friday afternoon. He was professional, almost apologetic. He asked me questions about my routine, medications, finances, then had me do a few simple cognitive tasks: count backward by sevens, draw a clock, read a paragraph and summarize it. I did all of it faster than he expected because I used to do incident reports at 3 a.m., on coffee and pure stubbornness. He glanced around my cabin. Organized, kitchen clean, tools arranged with labels in my barn like I was running a hardware store. "Mr. Price," he said finally, "I see no cause for concern here. You're clearly managing well." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Off the record, the caller sounded more angry than concerned. I nodded once. "Can you tell me who it was?" He hesitated again, then sighed. The caller identified herself as Sienna Rhodes. He wrote something on his clipboard. "I'll note in my report that the complaint appears to have been filed in bad faith." After he left, I sat on my porch and stared at the mountains until the sun went down. I wasn't scared anymore. I was done playing nice. The next week, Lila and I built a wall out of facts. She subpoenaed the listing platforms for account information. She sent a formal notice to the payment processor requesting a freeze on the funds due to fraud. She drafted a civil complaint we could file if needed. She also recommended a digital forensics consultant named Martin Hale, who could verify metadata on photos and trace the origin of the forged emails. Martin was the kind of guy who spoke quietly and made you feel like everything had a footprint. If Sienna thought the internet was a place you could lie without leaving tracks, Martin was about to correct that belief. Then my gate camera sent a notification. Motion detected. I opened the live feed and saw a black SUV pulling up. Sienna got out wearing a wide-brim hat like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle shoot. She walked to my gate and rattled it. The chain held. She looked right at the camera for a long beat, then smiled like she was posing. She held up her phone and started filming herself, gesturing at my property like it already belonged to her. I felt my heartbeat thump in my ears, but my hands were steady as I called the sheriff's non-emergency line. "This is Ethan Price," I said. "I have a person on my property who has been warned not to be here. She's filming and attempting access." The dispatcher asked if I was in danger. "Not immediate," I said. "But this is part of an ongoing fraud situation." "Stay inside," the dispatcher said. "A deputy is on the way." I watched Sienna pace by my gate, then talk into her phone with animated hands, like she was performing outrage for an audience that wasn't there. 10 minutes later, a deputy arrived. Sienna's posture changed instantly. She went from influencer at a scenic location to sweet family member misunderstanding. She waved, smiled, brought her voice down into that soft, concerned register that makes people think you're the reasonable one. I opened my door and stepped onto my porch when the deputy motioned for me. "Mr. Price?" he asked. That's me, I said. She claims you invited her, the deputy said. Is that true? No, I said. My attorney sent a cease and desist. There is no permission. I pulled the letters up on my phone and showed him. He read them, his face tightening as he scrolled. He walked back to Sienna. They talked. She started shaking her head, then pointed toward my house like I was the problem. Then the deputy returned. Sir, he said, we've told her to leave and not return. If she comes back, we can charge trespassing. Do you want to press charges now? I looked at Sienna standing by her SUV, arms crossed, staring at me like I'd violated some invisible family rule. Not right now, I said, but I want this documented. It will be, he said. You'll get a case number. The deputy waited until Sienna drove off, then followed her down the road long enough to make sure she didn't turn around. My hands shook afterward, not from fear, but from the weird grief of realizing someone Diane loved was willing to do this to me. That night, my phone rang. It was Diane's sister, Janine. For most of Diane's illness, Janine had been the steady one. She brought meals, sat with Diane during chemo, never made anything about herself. We weren't close, but we respected each other. Ethan, Janine said, what's going on with Sienna? I exhaled slowly and told her everything. The listings, the deposits, the fake email, the county complaint, the wellness check, the gate incident. When I finished, Janine was quiet for a long moment. Sienna says you're punishing her, she finally said. She says you promised her you'd help her build something and then you turned cruel. I never promised anything, I said. I said no from the first call. Janine's voice tightened. She's been spiraling, she admitted. Since Diane died, she's been saying she deserves a break, that the universe owes her, that she's going to claim her life. Your property became part of that fantasy. I swallowed. Janine, I don't want drama, I said. I just want to be left alone. I know, Janine said softly, and I'm sorry. Then, almost like she was ashamed to say it. But Sienna told my mom you were confused, out of it, that you're not thinking clearly. My jaw clenched. She filed a wellness report, I said. It was closed as bad faith. Janine's breath caught. Jesus, she whispered. Okay, listen, she's planning something. What? I asked. A wedding, Janine said, voice strained. A real wedding. She's promised a couple a venue. She told them it's secured. She's told vendors it's handled. She keeps saying she'll force you to see reason once everyone is there. My skin went cold. When? I asked. Next Friday, Janine said. Ethan, please be careful. After that call, Lila didn't let me float in shock. She went into action mode. If she brings people onto your property, she said, we treat it as trespassing and fraud. We coordinate with the sheriff ahead of time. And we prepare to protect the victims too, because those wedding guests didn't ask to be used as pawns. She had me send the sheriff's office, the case file, letters, screen captures, and the APS report confirmation. She also contacted the county inspector to close the unlicensed business complaint, with proof that I was a victim of impersonation. Martin, the digital forensics guy, finished his report. The porch photo on Sienna's listing had metadata linking it to my phone model and my private account upload date. The fake host email accounts were created from a device in Charlotte near Sienna's apartment. The host profile used my headshot cropped from an old city newsletter article about code compliance. He even found the template contract Sienna had downloaded from an event planning forum. It was all footprints. The week leading up to Friday felt like waiting for a storm you could see on the horizon but couldn't control. I slept poorly. I kept my phone charged. I checked my cameras more than I checked the weather. Hank followed me like he was trying to protect me from my own nerves. On Thursday night, Lila texted me, "Tomorrow we end it. Be ready. If you see vehicles, do not engage. Call the sheriff." I texted back, "Understood." And then I sat on my porch under the stars and thought about Diane. I thought about how she'd be heartbroken that her niece turned grief into a weapon. I also thought about how Diane would have wanted me safe, not polite. Friday afternoon, at 3:07 p.m., my gate camera sent a notification. Motion detected. I opened the live feed and saw a black van turn into my driveway, followed by a white SUV, followed by a car with a bouquet on the dashboard. Then more cars, a long line, like a slow parade of optimism heading toward a cliff. My heart thumped, but my hands were steady. I called the sheriff first, then I texted Lila. "They're here," she replied instantly, "on my way. Stay inside until deputies arrive." I watched through the camera as people got out smiling, waving at each other, carrying garment bags and gift boxes. A man in a suit checked his phone like he was confirming a schedule. A woman in a white robe with curlers held a clipboard and walked toward my porch. That was the stranger who asked about the arch, and that's where my story began. When I stepped onto my porch, the robe woman smiled like she'd found the host. "Hi," she said. "Quick question. Do you want the ceremony to face the creek or the barn?" Behind her, the wedding planner with the headset was already pointing toward my barn, calling for chairs to be unloaded like my property was a stage. I felt my throat tighten, but my voice stayed steady. "No," I said. The robe woman blinked. "No? No wedding?" I said. "You're on private property. This is not a venue." She looked down at her clipboard, confused. "But we have a contract," she said. "We paid the deposit. This is Willow Ridge Farm. Ethan Price is the host." "I am Ethan Price," I said, "and that contract is not mine. You've been scammed." The woman's smile faltered, then she frowned. "This isn't funny," she said. "My bride is in the car. She's nervous. We've driven 3 hours. I kept my tone gentle. "I'm not joking," I said, "and I'm sorry, but you need to stop unloading anything." The planner with the headset glanced over, irritated. "Sir, we're on a timeline," she snapped. "We have vendors arriving in 20 minutes. "Then you should call the person who took your money," I said, because it wasn't me. A small cluster of people had formed near the gate now, watching, whispering. Someone said, "Is this a prank?" Someone else said, "I knew this was too cheap for a mountain venue." Then a voice from the driveway called out, "Excuse me." A man in his 50s stepped forward, face tight, eyes sharp. He wore a suit like armor. "I'm the father of the bride," he said. "We paid a deposit. We have confirmations. We have emails from the host." He held up his phone and thrust it toward me. I didn't touch it. I just looked. "That email isn't mine," I said. "I have an attorney handling this." The father's eyes flicked past me to my porch, to my barn, to the creek glinting behind the trees. You could see his brain doing the same math mine had done earlier. "How do you reconcile this view with the fact that your daughter might be getting married in a scam?" His jaw tightened. "So where is Sienna?" he demanded. "She's the coordinator. She said everything was secured." Right on cue, my phone buzzed, a new motion alert. My gate camera showed a silver sedan pulling up fast. Dust kicked up behind it like the car was angry. Then Sienna stepped out, wearing a white dress and a wide smile like she was arriving at an award show. She spread her arms. "Hey everyone," she called bright and loud. "Welcome. So excited you're here." Her eyes snapped to me, then to the deputy cars that had just turned onto my road, because, yes, the sheriff arrived fast when you say fraud and trespassing in a crowd. Sienna's smile held for a second, then wobbled. Deputies stepped out. 2 of them. One was the same deputy from the gate incident. He recognized me and nodded once. The other scanned the crowd like he was counting variables. "Mr. Price?" the first deputy called. "I'm here," I said. The deputy approached, keeping his voice professional. "What's going on?" he asked. "These people were brought onto my property without permission," I said. "The organizer impersonated me online, took deposits, and forged documents." My attorney is en route. The deputy turned to Sienna. "Ma'am," he said, "what is your name?" Sienna lifted her chin. "Sienna Rhodes," she said, "and this is a private event. We have a contract with the owner." She looked at the crowd like she was rallying them. "This is a misunderstanding. He's grieving, and he's confused." The bride's father snapped. "Confused? My daughter is in a robe in the car because you promised her a venue." Murmurs rose like a wave. Sienna's eyes flashed, but she recovered fast. She pulled out her phone. "I have the contract," she said. "I'll show you." She swiped and held up a PDF to the deputy like it was a magic spell. "Retreat and Event Partnership Agreement," she read out loud, "signed by Ethan Price." At the bottom was my name and a signature that looked like mine at a glance. You could feel the crowd lean in, hope returning to their faces because people want paper to mean safety. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "That signature is forged." Sienna laughed sharply. "Oh my God," she said. "You're really doing this? In front of everyone? Uncle Ethan, this is cruel. Diane would be ashamed." The crowd went quiet. The name Diane hung in the air like a dare. I took a slow breath. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to let her use Diane one more time. "Diane would be ashamed that you used her death like a crowbar," I said calmly. "And she would be ashamed that you stole from strangers and dragged them onto private land to pressure me." Sienna's face flushed. "I didn't steal," she snapped. "They paid for a service." The bride's father shouted, "My bank says it's a payment to your personal account." Sienna's eyes widened for half a second before she masked it. The deputy looked between us. "Mr. Price," he said, "do you have proof you didn't sign this?" I nodded. "My attorney is bringing a forensic signature analyst report," I said, "and a digital forensics report linking the listing photos and host account to Sienna." Sienna scoffed. "Forensic analyst?" She laughed. "Uncle Ethan, this isn't a murder trial. This is family." "No," I said quietly. "This is fraud." At that exact moment, a black SUV pulled up behind the deputy cars. Lila stepped out in a navy blazer like she'd been born wearing it. Martin Hale stepped out too, carrying a laptop bag and a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Lila walked straight toward the deputies, then turned to the crowd and raised her voice just enough to be heard without shouting. "Hello," she said. "I'm Lila Carter, attorney for Ethan Price. This property is not, has never been, and will never be available for rental events. Any contract claiming otherwise is fraudulent. We have documentation and reports establishing impersonation, forgery, harassment, and illegal collection of deposits." She handed the deputies the folder. Martin opened his laptop on the hood of a cruiser, like this was just another workday, and pulled up files. Lila pointed to the PDF on Sienna's phone. "May I?" she asked the deputy. The deputy nodded. Lila didn't touch Sienna's phone. She pulled out her own copy of the forged contract and flipped to the signature page. "Mr. Price's actual signature on recorded property documents looks like this," she said, showing an official record copy. "Note the angle, the loop on the P, the consistent pressure patterns." Then she held up Sienna's PDF printout. "This is a traced signature," she said, "and we can demonstrate the source." Martin spoke up, quiet but clear. "The signature matches a condolence letter sent from Mr. Price to the Rhodes family after Diane Price's memorial," he said. The digital image of that signature was lifted, cleaned, and pasted onto a template contract. The pixel pattern is consistent with copy-paste editing. The crowd murmured again, but different now, not confusion. This sounded like math. Math makes lies nervous. The bride's father stepped forward, voice shaking with rage. "You forged his signature?" he demanded at Sienna. "You lied to my daughter?" Sienna's face went rigid. "This is being blown out of proportion," she said. "I was going to make it right." Lila kept her tone calm. You also filed a false wellness report with Adult Protective Services, Lila said. You filed false complaints with County Code Compliance. You trespassed at the gate. You continued to collect deposits after receiving cease and desist notices, and you created email accounts impersonating my client. She looked at the deputy. We've also notified the payment processor and requested an immediate freeze on remaining funds. Sienna's eyes darted. That was the first time she looked scared, not angry. The deputy turned to Sienna again. "Ma'am," he said, "I need you to step away from the crowd." Sienna lifted her chin like she was about to argue, then glanced around at all those faces, guests, planner, bridesmaids, and realized the room she'd built out of lies had windows now. She tried one last move. She looked at the bride's father and said softly, "I'm sorry. I panicked. I can fix this." But the father didn't soften. He raised his phone and showed the deputy a payment receipt and a chain of emails. Then another guest stepped up with their receipt. Then another. Then the robe woman, who turned out to be the bride's aunt, said, "She told us the host was excited about hosting." Sienna's voice went higher. "I didn't mean—" The deputy's tone changed, firm and official. "Sienna Rhodes," he said, "you are being detained pending investigation for fraud and trespassing." Sienna blinked like she couldn't believe reality wouldn't negotiate with her. "Uncle Ethan," she said, voice cracking, "you're ruining my life." I looked at her and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just exhaustion. "No," I said quietly. "You did that. I just stopped rescuing you." The deputies guided her to the cruiser. The wedding planner with the headset stood frozen, one hand on her microphone, like the script had fallen apart and she didn't know what page she was on. The guests were stunned. Some were crying. Some were furious. Some were already calling banks and credit card companies. Someone asked if there was another venue nearby, and the bridesmaid started hugging the bride, who finally stepped out of the car in her robe, eyes red and wide, like she'd walked into the wrong life. I did the only thing I could do that felt human. I stepped down from my porch and said, "I'm sorry," to the bride. "I truly am. This was supposed to be your day." The bride's lip trembled. "Did she know?" she whispered. "Did she know this wasn't real?" I swallowed. "I think she told herself it would become real if she pushed hard enough," I said, "but that doesn't make what she did okay." The bride nodded, tears spilling, and her father put an arm around her shoulders like he was holding the whole world up for her. The deputies cleared the property. They told the guests they were victims in a fraud investigation and that they'd receive instructions for restitution claims. The crowd slowly dispersed, cars pulling away one by one, leaving tire tracks in my gravel like evidence that this day had actually happened. When the last vehicle turned off my road, the mountains felt quiet again, but my chest didn't. It felt bruised. In the weeks that followed, the legal process moved the way legal processes move, slowly, methodically, without drama, unless you create it. Lila filed motions and responses. Martin provided his reports. Sienna's business accounts were examined and found to be mostly personal spending with occasional deposits from desperate people chasing a dream. She took a plea deal that included restitution and probation, and a strict no-contact order. There were also consequences in her own family, though those were less clean and more painful. Janine called me 2 days after the arrest and cried. She didn't defend Sienna. She didn't excuse her. She just cried and said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I let her cry because grief makes people messy, and Diane would have wanted compassion without surrender. The county dropped the code compliance investigation and sent me a letter confirming I was not operating any business, and that the complaint appeared to be malicious. APS closed the wellness report with notes about bad faith. Even the sheriff's office sent me a copy of the incident report with a case number that felt like a strange trophy I never wanted. But the part that surprised me most wasn't the paperwork. It was the quiet after. It was how loneliness and peace can look like the same thing until you decide what you're protecting. One afternoon in late October, Janine drove up my driveway alone. She got out holding 2 coffees and a paper bag. She looked smaller than I remembered, like she'd been carrying other people's chaos for years. "I'm not here to ask you for anything," she said quickly before I could speak. "I just wanted to apologize, and I wanted to tell you something." We sat on my porch with Hank at our feet, and the mountains turning gold behind the barn. "Diane would have backed you," Janine said quietly. "She loved her niece, but she loved truth more. And she always said you were the only person in our family who could say no without hating anyone." My throat tightened. I stared at the creek where sunlight flickered on moving water. "I didn't want any of this," I admitted. "I wanted peace." Janine nodded. "I know," she said, "and I'm sorry Sienna tried to steal it." She reached into the paper bag and pulled out a small wooden plaque. It was simple, hand-carved letters: "Willow Ridge, find your quiet." "I made it," she said. "It's not fancy, but it felt right." I took it carefully, like it might break. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. After Janine left, I walked out to the barn and mounted the plaque on a beam near the door. Then I sat on a stump and listened to the creek until the sky turned purple. Hank pressed his head into my leg like he was making sure I didn't float away. "Here's what I learned. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about your own family and your own boundaries, saying no doesn't feel heroic in the moment. It feels lonely. It feels like you're the villain in someone else's story. It feels like you're breaking a rule you never agreed to, but boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. They're the line that keeps your life from becoming somebody else's plan." A month after the wedding fiasco, I finished rebuilding the last section of the barn roof. I stood back and looked at it. Straight lines, solid beams, the kind of work that doesn't care about likes or followers or fantasy. I built a bench under the willow tree by the creek and screwed a small brass plate to it. Diane Price. Breathe here. Some mornings I sit there with my coffee, and I watch the fog lift off the water, and I let myself miss her without letting anyone weaponize that missing. The mountains don't care about my family drama. The creek doesn't care about forged contracts. The willow doesn't care about internet lies. It just keeps growing, quietly, steadily, doing what it was made to do. And when I hear Hank's pause on the porch and the wind moving through the leaves, I think of Diane's voice from years ago, soft and sure. "Ethan, you're not mean, you're preventative maintenance." Maybe that's true. Maybe this whole mess was just another safety inspection. Except this time, the building I was protecting was my own life. And for the first time since she died, I felt something close to peace again. Not the naive peace where nothing ever goes wrong, but the real peace. The kind you earn by drawing a line and holding it, even when somebody calls you cruel for doing it. That's what boundaries are. They're not a wall you build to keep love out. They're a fence you build to keep your home from being stolen. And this time, I didn't let anyone take it away.